when you are, drowning in 1,000 unread emails and just constantly putting out everyone else's emergencies, the absolute worst advice you can get is to, like, do less.
Oh, yeah, completely.
Right. Because if you're walking around with that sinking sensation that you have absolutely zero control over your own time, the standard playbook tells you to delegate, to drop things, to just say no.
Which is practically impossible for most people.
Exactly. But the science actually says that to save yourself, you need to do the exact opposite. You need to add something to your plate.
It is, I mean, it's a fundamentally counterintuitive premise. But when you look at the psychological mechanics of overwhelm, it actually makes perfect sense.
Right.
The kind of exhaustion you're describing, it isn't just physical fatigue, it is a structural, cognitive exhaustion.
Yeah.
Because your entire life is functioning as a reaction to external demands. You're constantly playing defense.
Always playing defense, yeah. Which brings us to the core insight from today's source material, which comes from Mel Robbins. The way to reclaim your life from that chaotic, defensive posture isn't by trying to empty the ocean with the teacup.
No, definitely not.
It's by intentionally adding one deeply meaningful, intensely personal goal into the absolute chaos of your routine.
And psychological research validates this approach beautifully.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because when the world feels heavy and entirely unpredictable, inserting a purely intrinsic goal, something you carve out purely for yourself, it acts as a cognitive life raft.
A life raft. I like that.
Yeah, it becomes an anchor in the storm, giving you this immediate sense of agency. It's the one thing that, your boss, your inbox, or just the chaotic world around you cannot touch.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because in this deep dive, we are looking at the science-backed architecture of how to actually build that life raft without just, burning out.
Right.
And we are going to tear down the very common, almost universal mistakes people make when they try to pull themselves out of a rut. Because having a goal just isn't enough, right?
No, it's really not.
The mechanics of how we approach it completely dictate whether we sink or swim.
Yeah, and the structural mistakes usually happen before a person even takes their first real step.
Wait, really? Before they even start?
Exactly, because people tend to use their exhaustion as, like, a defensive shield. They tell themselves that they are simply too tired to even figure out what they want to do.
Wow, yeah. Which guarantees they just stay trapped in that reactive cycle.
Totally.
There is a quote the source brings up from Oprah that just hits the nail on the head here. She says, most people never take the time to get clear about what they want.
Such a powerful observation.
It really is. And it makes me think of a GPS system. Goal setting operates on the exact same logic. You absolutely cannot navigate out of a storm if you refuse to type a destination into the dashboard.
Right, you drive in circles.
You drive in circles forever. It's burning through your fuel.
Yeah.
But, I mean, if someone is totally lost in the fog of their own exhaustion, how do they even figure out what to type into the GPS? It feels like this massive, insurmountable task.
It does. But the strategy our source suggests to bypass this is just brilliant because it lowers the stakes so much.
Okay.
You don't look for some grand, life-defining passion. You just look around your immediate environment and identify a friction point.
A friction point.
Yeah. You just look for a small problem in your own life that you genuinely want to solve.
Oh, that makes so much sense. This is exactly what her husband, Chris, did in the source material.
Yes. Perfect example.
He was feeling this deep sense of isolation, the lack of community. And he didn't set out with some grandiose mission to revolutionize neighborhood connectivity or anything.
No, he just wanted to stop feeling lonely on a weeknight.
Exactly. So he just started a free 1-hour Tuesday night meditation circle at a local spot. Just solving that one friction point for himself gave him this massive infusion of meaning.
And the source had a very similar experience with her own physical health.
Right, the protein thing.
Yeah, so at age 56, she needed to consume, I think it was 125 to 140 grams of protein daily for longevity and muscle retention.
Which is a ton of protein.
It's so much. She found it practically impossible to actually eat that much without consuming this massive surplus of calories. So the friction was just the daily frustration of trying to meet that metric.
Right.
So she ended up solving her own problem by founding a company, Pure Genius Protein.
Wow.
Yeah, the problem itself birthed the goal.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So identifying the friction point gets the destination into the GPS. but the actual neuroscience of how we program that destination into our brain is fascinating to me.
Oh, it's incredible.
The source relies heavily on the research of Dr. Jim Doty from Stanford, specifically focusing on Hebbian learning.
Right, Hebbian learning.
Yeah, where the fundamental principle is basically what fires together wires together.
Which is where we transition from abstract desire to actual biological rewiring.
Okay, break that down for us.
So to make those neural pathways fire together, you have to intentionally engage multiple sensory systems to encode the goal into your subconscious.
Multiple systems, so you can't just think about it.
Exactly. You don't just sit on the couch and think, oh, I'd like to do this. You take a physical pencil and write it down.
Ah, right.
Because that engages your tactile and motor systems. Then you read it silently, which engages the visual cortex.
Okay.
Then you read it out loud to engage your auditory processing. And finally, you vividly visualize the micro steps required to do it.
I see this constantly in high-level athletics. Like Olympians visualize the exact angle of their dive before they hit the board, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Or pilots run through emergency checklists in a flight simulator. They're doing mental reps to build physical pathways.
And that mental repetition serves a very specific neurological function. When you are overwhelmed and exhausted, your brain defaults to what neuroscientists call the default mode network.
The DMMN.
Right, the DMN. It's essentially your brain's idling gear. But it's not a peaceful idle.
Not at all.
No. When left unchecked, the DMN is the engine behind that endless loop of negative self-talk. It scans for threats, it regurgitates past embarrassments, it tells you you're too late or too tired.
Oh man, I know that loop very well. So by forcing your brain to physically and mentally rehearse the goal, you are actively hijacking that system.
Precisely. You're shifting the brain into a task-positive state, which physically cannot operate at the same time as the DMN's anxiety loop.
So you break the cycle.
You literally override the system with new supportive neural pathways.
That is so cool.
But, once you have that clarity and that neurological foundation, you immediately run into a sociological problem.
Oh.
And this is where the source's advice gets incredibly sharp and, frankly, a little ruthless.
Oh, I know exactly what you're going to say. Rule number 2, fire your family.
Yeah, fire your family.
When I first read that, I completely recoiled. I mean, aren't your loved ones supposed to be your ultimate support system?
Mm-hmm.
Telling someone to fire their family as their cheerleading squad sounds deeply cynical.
It sounds cynical until you actually examine the psychology of outsourcing motivation.
Okay, fair.
Think about it. Your family hasn't done the thing you want to do. They don't share the specific vision, and more importantly, they carry their own anxieties about your well-being.
Ah.
So expecting them to unconditionally support a major shift in your life is actually placing an unfair burden on them.
That makes a lot of sense when you look at the example of the source's daughter, Sawyer.
Oh, yeah, the backpacking trip.
Yeah, she wanted to backpack solo for 5 months across Asia. As a mother, Mel was absolutely terrified. She was completely unsupportive. Not because she didn't believe in her daughter, but because a solo trip across Asia triggered every maternal fear she had.
Right, which is a totally natural reaction for a parent.
Exactly. If Sawyer had waited for her mother's enthusiastic blessing to book the flight, she never would have gone. She had to completely ignore her mother's input to achieve the goal.
And firing your family actually preserves the relationship.
Because you stop resenting them.
Exactly. You stop resenting them for not understanding a dream that doesn't even belong to them. Like Chris, the husband we mentioned earlier, he spent 2.5 years writing a book.
Yeah.
He didn't ask his family to read a single draft or validate his daily word counts. Instead, he got his support from an online Zoom writing group where strangers just sit in silence and write together.
That's wild.
Well,
But if I'm understanding the implication here, it means that if you're completely cutting off your external validation system, your spouse, your parents, your friends, that leaves a massive void.
yes, it does.
You can't rely on them to push you, which means you have to somehow manufacture that willpower entirely from within.
That is the exact pivot point, and this leads directly into the research of Dr. Elliot Berkman from the University of Oregon.
Okay.
He models goal achievement through what he calls the will and the way. What you are describing right now is the will.
The will.
Yes. The will is your intrinsic motivation. It is the deeply personal, often hidden engine driving the action.
And what's really interesting is that the intrinsic why is rarely the socially acceptable answer we give people at dinner parties.
Oh, almost never.
Right. It takes some real digging to find it. The source talked about training for a marathon in her 30s. If you asked her then, she would have said she was doing it to challenge herself or check off a bucket list item.
The standard answer.
Yeah, standard answer. But she eventually realized her true intrinsic why was that marathon training gave her the perfect, unassailable excuse to disappear for 3 to 4 hours on a Sunday and just hang out with her friends away from her daily responsibilities.
It had nothing to do with fitness.
Nothing at all.
And that kind of honesty is required to sustain the effort. She uses another current example about lifting heavy weights at age 57.
All right.
The extrinsic societal goal would be doing it to look a certain way. But she openly admits her deep personal why is strictly to avoid physical frailty so she can comfortably dance at her future grandchildren's weddings.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, when the will is rooted in your identity and your core values, it provides a well of resilience that surface-level vanity metrics simply cannot match.
Finding that deep identity level why and taking radical ownership of it is incredibly empowering. But, I keep coming back to the reality of the listener's day-to-day life.
Sure.
Having a powerful why doesn't change the fact that the alarm goes off at 6 a.m., the kids are screaming, and the inbox is overflowing. How do you actually execute the steps when your cognitive bandwidth is already maxed out?
Well, that is the second half of Dr. Berkman's equation.
The
Way.
The way.
To conquer the way, we have to look at the work of Wharton professor Katie Milkman. Her core finding completely dismantles the whole hustle culture mentality.
Thank goodness for that.
Right. We have to stop making our goals a miserable grind. Human nature dictates that if a process feels like punishment, your brain will eventually force you to quit.
Yeah, makes sense.
So to circumvent this, you have to build instant gratification into the friction.
So it's essentially like hiding a dog's medicine inside a piece of cheese.
Exactly.
The brain's dopamine hit from the reward just masks the cognitive friction of the difficult task. Milkman calls this temptation bundling.
That is a perfect analogy. The source applies this by only allowing herself to listen to her absolute favorite guilty pleasure fantasy audiobooks when she is doing something physically painful.
Like the dead arm hang.
Yes. The dead arm hang to improve her grip strength. She is marrying the cognitive friction of the exercise with an immediate, irresistible reward.
And if you are entirely overwhelmed by just mapping out the steps to get started, you can use technology to lower the barrier to entry.
Yes, this is a great tip.
The source suggests using an AI tool, like Microsoft Copilot, to map the path. You literally type in your massive, intimidating goal and ask the AI to break it down into 30 tiny, fun daily actions.
It just completely removes the executive dysfunction of having to stare at a blank page and figure out step one.
Exactly.
Removing that executive friction is crucial, but there is actually a deeper layer to the way that involves how you view the finish line.
Oh.
Yeah, the habits expert, James Clear, argues that to truly succeed, you have to realize the goal isn't actually the outcome. An outcome-based goal is fragile.
Okay, so what is the real goal then?
The real goal is a psychological identity shift.
Ah, this shifts the entire paradigm. Instead of saying, I want to lose 10 pounds, which is an outcome, you say, I am a runner.
Yes.
The goal shouldn't be phrased as, I must force myself to do 10 minutes of meditation today. It should be anchored as, I am the kind of person who chooses peace.
Exactly. When you change the phrasing to, I'm the kind of person who, you create cognitive dissonance if you fail to act.
That was clever.
If you identify as someone who drinks water, choosing soda feels out of character. It changes the action from a chore you have to complete into a statement of who you are.
Which brings us to Rule 4, and honestly, the most practical, actionable strategy of this entire framework, the Hot 15.
The Hot 15, I love this.
The concept is that you only need to dedicate 15 minutes a day to this intrinsic goal. Or, if you are truly buried, 15 minutes a week.
It is the ultimate antidote to the paralysis of perfectionism.
It really is. I think of it as just laying a single brick on a path. You don't have to build the whole road today. The pressure to build the road is what keeps people from starting.
You're right. You just lay one brick.
Exactly. If you want to be the kind of person who walks daily, your Hot 15 for the first week might literally just be putting on your shoes, walking to the end of your driveway, and walking back inside. That is a brick.
If your goal is to get out of debt, you don't need a comprehensive 5-year financial model today.
No.
Your Hot 15 today is just logging into your bank account and spending 15 minutes looking at your recurring subscriptions. Tomorrow's Hot 15 is canceling one of them.
Right. And if you want to write a book, you sit at your desk for 15 minutes. And even if you stare at the screen and just type the words, I don't know what to write, my brain is empty, over and over until the timer goes off, you still laid a brick.
You still proved your identity as the kind of person who sits down to write.
Exactly.
And the timing of when you lay that brick matters tremendously.
Oh, right. Morning versus evening.
Yes. Dr. Christoph Randler, a biologist who studies chronotype and behavior, found that anchoring these intentions first thing in the morning dramatically increases follow-through.
Because you have to secure your life raft before the storm starts howling.
Exactly. If you wait until 5 p.m. after the world has battered you with demands all day, your cognitive reserves are depleted. You have to take your 15 minutes before the emails start pouring in.
Okay, but let's look at the reality of how life actually unfolds. Because this is where I want to play devil's advocate for a second.
Go for it.
You are doing your Hot 15, you're laying your bricks every morning, and then life hits you hard. You get a terrible flu that knocks you out for a week.
Yeah.
Or you have to travel for work, or a family member has an emergency and you completely miss a month.
Hmm?
For most people, when that unbroken chain of habits snaps, they experience this massive shame spiral.
Oh, totally.
They throw their hands up, declare the experiment a failure, and just quit entirely.
And that shame spiral is a symptom of misunderstanding what discipline actually is.
Really?
Yeah. We tend to view discipline through the lens of high-intensity, unbroken streaks of perfection. But Angela Duckworth's extensive research on grit at the University of Pennsylvania tells a completely different neurological story.
Okay, what does the research say?
It says true discipline, the kind that rewires your brain and leads to mastery, doesn't look like high intensity. It looks like slow, methodical consistency.
The Michael Phelps example illustrates this perfectly.
Yes.
He is arguably one of the greatest Olympians in history. Yet his coach famously noted that Phelps rarely gave a 10 out of 10 effort at practice. He was usually operating at a 7 or an 8.
Which runs completely counter to hustle culture's demand for 110% effort every single day.
Yeah, it really does.
The secret to Phelps's greatness wasn't that he destroyed himself in every session. It was that he swam every single day. Neurologically, the brain cares far more about the frequency of an action than the intensity of it when building a permanent pathway.
So giving a consistent 7 out of 10 effort keeps the habit loop unbroken without inducing the burnout that inevitably follows a 10 out of 10 effort.
Exactly.
So when that disruption inevitably happens, when you miss a day or a week or a month, how do we prevent the shame spiral?
Well, this is where the visualization of your brick analogy becomes a critical tool for resilience. Let's say you meditate every day for a month. You have laid 30 bricks.
Right.
Then you experience a profound personal loss. You spend 6 months actively grieving, just trying to survive the day, and you don't meditate a single time during those 6 months. You feel like you've completely failed. But you didn't lose the path.
Because the bricks you laid didn't spontaneously disappear just because you stopped building.
That is the crucial realization. When the grief lifts and you turn around, those 30 bricks are still right there behind you, permanently cemented into your foundation.
Wow.
You only lose the path if you refuse to turn back around and lay the 31st brick. Elite performers are not people with flawless, unbroken records. They don't possess some superhuman immunity to failure or interruption.
Yeah, they're human.
Elite performers are simply the people who normalize the act of coming back. They experience the failure, they process the interruption, and then they quietly pick up the next brick.
It really is a profound paradigm shift. Instead of demanding perfection, you just demand a return.
Beautifully said.
So, looking back at the architecture of this entire process, when you are exhausted and overwhelmed by a life spent reacting to others,
Yes.
the way out is to pick one meaningful friction-solving goal for yourself.
Yes.
You write it down and visualize it to hijack your brain's anxiety loop.
Yeah.
You lovingly fire your family as your motivation team so you can take radical ownership of your own ambition.
Right.
You dig past the surface to find your intrinsic why, and you use temptation bundling to find a fun way to execute it. You claim just 15 minutes a day to prove your new identity. And above all, when life inevitably knocks you off track, you remember that your progress hasn't vanished. You just pick up the next brick.
It is a scientifically grounded blueprint for slowly taking your life back 15 minutes at a time.
And I want to speak directly to you listening to this right now. You deserve to have something in your life every single week that brings you a sense of agency and joy, completely independent of your job title or your duties to your family.
You really do.
You are allowed to build a life raft. And the truth is, simply pushing play and listening to this deep dive today, that was an intentional act of focusing on your own growth. That was, in fact, your very first brick.
Which leaves us with a necessary and somewhat uncomfortable question to consider as we step back into the chaos of our routines.
Okay, what is it?
If the simplest, most scientifically validated way to gain control over a chaotic life is to intentionally carve out just 15 minutes for your own intrinsic goal, what does that say about how we currently measure productivity in our society?
Ooh.
Are we constantly keeping ourselves busy, volunteering to put out other people's fires, simply to avoid the quiet, daunting responsibility of actually facing our own dreams?
Wow. That is a question worth sitting with. Remember, the storm isn't going anywhere, but you get to choose whether or not you build your raft. Keep laying those brokes.